Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good night.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me? Yes, apparently. Yes, you can hear me for the ones who are online. Welcome and thank you for joining the CFS side event organized by Foresight4Food and the CFS high-level panel of experts. This is not finished. This is not an alarm to say this is finished. You are at the right place if you choose and came for the event Foresight and Future Scenarios for Food Systems Transformation, Building Resilience and Fostering Adaptation to Protect Against Future Crises. So don't leave if you came for that. I just mentioned that the event is recorded, and thanks to the translators for translation that is available. My name is Patrick Caron. I'm researcher at CIRAD, which is a French agricultural research institution. I'm vice president of the University of Montpellier and a member of the CGIAR board. Well, we face a paradox. On the one hand, we have plenty of data and knowledge, and on the other hand, we are deficient when it comes to featuring our future. Who would have imagined COVID and Ukrainian crisis just 3 years ago? You may raise your hand, but I will not believe you. I will not surprise anyone by saying that the world is facing dramatic spiral of crisis with huge impact on food sovereignty and food security. No surprise neither to affirm that we need to dramatically reshape our food systems that are in the same time at the heart of the food crisis mechanism and affected by this crisis. We have to imagine the different plausible futures, the different scenarios to design the one future we want. This is what we are calling foresight, not to predict, but rather to engage society, political leaders, the academia, consumers, producers, stakeholders in the food systems, in imagining and co-creating pathways towards a different and sustainable world. Well, we did not want to wait for pandemics, nor thought this could happen, as I said. Back in 2017, a group of colleagues with interest in foresight and food system and food systems on the one hand, from across research institutions, development organizations, and private sector from all over the world, came together in Oxford. And I see some people who were already there at that moment, and explore how foresight thinking and methods might make a bigger contribution to bring about change in food systems. With two assumptions that I will remind here, with the risk of repeating myself, we need a profound transformation, as evidenced by my CIRAD colleagues. Food systems in the 20th century has been incredibly performative if we take some criteria. But we are in the 21st century and things have changed. And this is, for example, reflected by the CGAR mission to transform food, land, and water systems. We need to look forward. Literally, this means about foresight. And the future is not just the continuation of the past, and forecast is not sufficient. After Oxford, we continue. There was a follow-up meeting that was held in Montpellier in 2018, organized by the University of Montpellier and Agropolis International, which led to the Foresight4Food initiative. I've been involved from the start, and I've very happily co-chaired this initiative with Tim Benton because of 4 motivations. 1, we need data and evidence. This is, of course, crucial. But there is, by definition, no evidence about the future. We need to ensure collective sense-making and turn data and knowledge into design assets. This means integrating data and evidence with stakeholders' engagement, learning, and expertise. 2, we need to be prepared and proactive and not just reactive and responsive to crisis. We have to invent a different future, our future, and we don't yet know how it will look like. 3, we need to better interface science and policy and to renew the way of engaging science through dialogue in order to increase capacities to collectively design the future we want. And 4, there are plenty of approaches and methods that compete or complement each other. And we therefore have a great opportunity to confront them, to establish a school of practices and learning through a global hub. Over these last 4 years, we've been piloting an approach, building up resources, and undertaking a range of projects. Thanks to funding from the government of Netherlands in partnership with IFAD, we are now able to share the advance of Foresight4Food. As John Ingram, who is already online, will explain, this will involve detailed work over 3 years in 5 focus countries, yet alongside support for global networking, learning, and capacity development. Today is a wonderful opportunity to launch this new phase of work and to share thinking on the importance of foresight and food system change. We will be hosting a 3rd Foresight4Food meeting in Montpellier early next year, and we'll certainly bring on board the outcome of today's discussion. If you are interested and would like to participate, please get in touch. Let me know how, hand over to Jim Woodhill, just here, the lead of Foresight4Food initiative, who will outline this afternoon's program, explain a bit more about what we mean by foresight, and then moderate the remainder of the meeting. Thank you very much. Floor to you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick, and welcome to everybody. And Patrick, thank you for flying in at 5 a.m. this morning. What we'd like to do this afternoon, I think, is just give you a little bit of a sense of the menu cart of Foresight and the work of Foresight4Food. And then I think we're inviting you back to come and have a longer meal in other sessions. An hour and a quarter is pretty short time to do this. We've got a lot to get through, but we just would really like to share some of the basic ideas. I'll give a brief introduction to what we mean by Foresight for Food Systems Transformation. We'll hear a little bit about the work of the Africa Foresight Academy. We'll hear about what's been happening with the high-level panel of experts work on data for food systems transformation and how that links to foresight issues. We'll then have a brief introduction to the new FAST program, and then we'll have a discussion with some of our colleagues from Africa, Asia, and here around what we think the future opportunities for foresight are. And I will try and keep everybody on time. So with that, let me just share with you some initial thoughts about what we mean by foresight for food systems transformation. And I'll go through a few of the basic building blocks and keeping a watch on my own time here. So of course, it's clear to everybody, and it's been really re-emphasized again this week, that to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we do really need a fundamental shift in how we're consuming and producing food. And if we want to bring about that transformation, we obviously need to be taking longer term perspectives. We need to get a whole new societal understanding of food systems. We need to rethink how we can reform economic incentives. And we need proactive decisions for the future if we want to achieve resilience and well-being. So how do we go about doing all of that? So the basic idea we're looking at here with foresight and scenarios is to recognize that the future can unfold in multiple different ways that we can't actually predict. But if we think about how things can unfold, we can look a little bit more and say, would we like to be there or not? And we can think about what would be more desirable, and we can think about how we might respond if we end up in different scenarios. So that's the basic idea. It's a way of engaging people to work together in co-creating the sort of future we would like. As Patrick said, not that we can predict the future, Not that we can engineer the future, but if we think a little bit more about the future, we can perhaps direct ourselves into a position we would like to be in the future. So there's two key parts of the Foresight exercise. One is getting a better understanding about the big clear trends that we are sure are going to shape the future in one way or another. And the other part that's a little bit more challenging is to try and get a better handle on the critical uncertainties. The things we're not sure about, the unknowns that we think could shift the future in one way or another. So we can illustrate this simply with this little cartoon, if you like. The ducks paddling down the river and saying, should we be thinking about the future or not? And you can see the crocodile there. And so there's different scenarios that you can be imagining here. Now, will you end up as crocodile lunch? Will you have a narrow escape? Will you have a smooth ride? Will you perhaps end up in an unseen dead end? How could you prepare for those different scenarios? But critically, how can you see short-term decision points that could perhaps enable you to take a different path? So Foresight's thinking about the future to improve decision-making today, and scenarios as being prepared for alternative futures. So Foresight4Food was set up, as Patrick mentioned, about 4 years ago. We've been experimenting with these ideas in a number of different countries across Africa and Asia, with the idea of creating a community of practice, a brokering hub, doing synthesis work, helping to develop a deeper understanding and methodologies and so forth. So exploring the future for being able to make better decisions today. One thing that's just really important to mention, I think, is we often get caught up in all the crises and risks and problems we're facing. In our view, Foresight is very much about also looking at the transformational opportunities. What are the things we can look at that can help us to tackle the risks that we're seeing in front of us? There's three main elements to what we've been working with in what I'll call the Foresight4Food approach. One is a food systems model. The second is a Foresight framework. And the third is a Foresight process. Let me just very briefly touch on each of these. This will be nothing new to any of you, I suspect, but thinking about a food systems from a food systems framework can be very powerful in helping different actors to understand what we're talking about, from production to consumption, organizing data around the key food system outcomes, organizing data around the key drivers that are shaping the food system, getting a better understanding of all the actions that are going on from production to consumption. And of course, part of this is really making sure we're taking a whole food systems approach, that we're understanding all of the relationships between actors, that we're understanding how what happens in one part of the system affects the interests, the values, the way different actors in the system are operating. I won't go through this framework in too much detail, but it integrates a number of things. One of the things we're really talking about in the Foresight work is how can you bring together processes of stakeholder engagement, analysis, sense-making with the data, the information base, the computer modeling to help think about futures and to think about creating more desirable futures. In this Foresight process, we want to work people through why do you do Foresight, getting a better understanding of the overall system, working out the drivers and trends, engaging with visions, using scenarios to do that, and thinking about how we can actually influence change in the system. And we have a set of processes here, and now I invite you to join us in more detail on looking what each of these mean. There's a whole lot of different steps that fit into each of these several elements. It sort of mirrors a little bit what I've just said, but it's about scoping the process, mapping the system, assessing trends, constructing scenarios, assessing the implications for different stakeholders, exploring the sort of systems changes that we think might be desirable, and working out pathways to do that. And underneath each of those steps, there's a whole range of analytical frameworks, participatory methods and processes that we can use and that we've been testing out in a range of different countries. Just to show you what this means, my apologies, in a little bit of a practical sense, we've been doing some very interesting work in Bangladesh, looking at the future of Dhaka's food system. And just some basic issues. I mean, we know that population there is going to double in the next 20 years. We know that income is going to increase by threefold. How are you going to feed this population of DACA depending on future diets? What's the overall structure of the agri-food sector going to look like? Is it going to be supporting lots of small and medium scale enterprises, giving lots of employment? Might it shift to a much more consolidated big business shift? How are we going to drive things towards more healthy and sustainable diets? Or what might happen if it moves towards an unhealthy and resource-intensive diets? Lots of stakeholder engagement in this process, lots of bringing the data together, lots of thinking about the implications for what's going to happen in DACA, for example. Even down to very practical things. What does it mean for urban planning around wet markets, or policies that might influence supermarkets, or creating better infrastructure links between urban and rural areas? So lots of practical implications out of doing this foresight and scenario work. And as I've mentioned, what's really critical is to link all of this to dialogue and the visualization of data, and trying to look at how we can get the best data to give us insight into the future using existing trends, but also trying to look at the sort of future changes that might happen with the best computer modeling we can do. You can see here also some of the modeling we've been drawing in around climate change impacts in Bangladesh. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about. And finally, Foresight really sits between three things, I would suggest. One is systems thinking. How do we work with complexity in human systems? How do we engage with governance and decision-making to be adaptive in our decision-making, to be adaptive in our policy? And how do we recognize that there's a huge human dimension to this? What are the assumptions we are making about the future? What are the sort of blinkers that we sometimes have on when we look at the future or we look at different situations? How do we deal with the conflicts and tensions between different groups? So how can Foresight support all of these sorts of processes is what we're working with. So look, that I hope just gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about. You can find a lot more on our website. And with that, what I'd like to do is to invite Abdurazak Ibrahim, who is one of our partners in Africa with the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, to share for a few minutes what's happening with the Africa Foresight Academy. Abdurazak, over to you.
I was listening and they want to...
Thank you very much, Jim.
So who do you talk to?
Thank you for this opportunity. I don't know whether I will be able to share my screen here. Okay, I see that I can do that. So let me just quickly.
Business development at the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. She has a BSc in botany and zoology and MSc in zoology from the University of Nairobi.
Our technical people, we seem to be having a problem with the sound here with two voices.
She acquired her PhD through the Africa Research Postgraduate.
Put a thumbs up. Can you hear Abdurazak? We can't hear anything in the room here.
She is
okay. Just to confirm, do you hear me?
Women in Agricultural Research and Development Award. Welcome, Dr. Waibantu. I'll project your slides. Please.
Hi, Jim. Just to confirm, are you able to hear me from that end and see my slide?
Abdurazak, I think you can begin again now. I think we've solved the technical problem here.
Okay, so just confirmation, if you can hear me, you can wave. All right. So thank you very much. My name is Abdurazak Ibrahim. I work here in Ghana at the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, where we are hosting the Africa Foresight Academy. The Africa Foresight Academy is part of the activities that I coordinate here in FARA as the cluster lead of what we call institutional capacity and future scenarios. And we've been doing a bit of work on foresight and food systems approach over the years, and thanks to the partnership that we have with the Foresight4Food initiative and the funding actually that we received from the EC through IFAD in the context of the CADEP XP4 and a host of other programs and projects. we're able to now put together an organizing framework for the Africa Foresight Academy, and is implementing a number of activities. So I just wanted to, in this 5 minutes, take you through some of the key ideas and a series of events that have really culminated in the establishment of the Africa Foresight Academy, and some of the few activities that we've been doing over the last 2 years. And the idea of establishing an Africa chapter of the Global Agricultural Foresight Academy came about in 2012 in Dublin, when a meeting of experts got together. And with that, a series of iterations, workshops, reflective exercises, and practical application of the Foresight tools have been happening all the way to 2018, when we had, for the first time, a training of the first cohort of what we call the Africa Foresight Expert. So those were 20 different experts from different countries, and we trained them, and they became the first cohort of the academy trainees. And with that, we went on to conduct a number of studies to look at really a meta-analysis. Who is doing what is the common understanding? How can African countries mainstream the foresight tools and approaches in the food systems in the way that they plan their investment plans, in the way that they plan for the future, so that really they design the kind of future that we want in Africa. The 2020 COVID pandemic actually gave us some kind of advantage, because it brought together a lot of digital active participation in some of the activities that we've been hosting. Particularly, that was when we had a series of webinars with the Foresight4Food group, and that helped us also to build the Africa Foresight Academy framework, which was validated and culminating into a time when we were in Oxford recently to have a sort of meeting in terms of organizing and looking forward how we can continue to support the work. So the objective of the academy actually is to facilitate the strengthening of capacities and systems thinking. Jim has mentioned a number of those key issues, and the idea is to ensure that our stakeholders, our constituencies, are able to leverage on research and innovation such that they are more responsive to our local needs in Africa. So, and then also the Africa Foresight Academy provides a sort of space where the users and developers of foresight tools can come together and actually train our various associates and beneficiaries, so that more and more African institutions are equipped with the ability to confront challenges and disruptions in our food systems, and they're able to really actively shape the future visions for sustainable growth. There are a number of areas where we act, in terms of sensitization, really popularizing the use of foresight tools, also capacity development, facilitating the actual foresight process itself at country level, promoting more awareness and strengthening capacities, and particularly in academic institutions. We have plans to support African institutions, academic institutions, in adopting and testing foresight relevant curriculum. And then the interface between science and participatory foresight processes, documenting experiences at various levels. We are on the internet, there's a page actually right now of Africa Foresight Academy, where at the moment we're interacting with about 5,454 different individuals from various, mainly from Africa, but all over the world. We really welcome your feedback, and there you can find more details on what is happening. For example, today we will be launching a massive open online agricultural course on foresight and food systems, where we will be opening a number of models to about 274 participants. So this is part of the activities of the academy. And the academy is designed for all stakeholders, anyone that's interested in this food and nutrition security in Africa. So from agriculturalists to food scientists, to extension practitioners, to researchers, so on to women farmers. They're all, the academy is designed for them, and there'll be spaces for them to leverage on. In terms of desired outcomes, we really want to see increased capacity, because really In Africa currently, if you conduct a sort of a meta-analysis, you will see that there's this paucity of capacity for foresight and the mainstreaming of food systems approach. But right now there's a momentum, especially coming after the UN Food System Summit, which we're also leveraging on. And we want to see that there's more, this translation of science, innovation to impact. And we do that through building a different community of practice. So the Academy and the Foresight4Food initiative, actually we've been speaking around establishing country foresight hubs, and also entrepreneurship and livelihoods, because really you want to, as much as possible, see that the end users, those at the very end line of the recipients of technologies and new, and those that are vulnerable to some of the big shocks and disruptions in food system, really leverage and benefit from the outcomes of the foresight exercises that they do.
I might just ask you to move on a little bit quickly.
Sure, sure. No, this is probably my last slide, just to show some of the partners that we've been working with, from African Union all the way to the various sub-regional organizations. And so this is, I mean, we can have a more detailed discussion during the panel, but I thought to share this. Thank you so much. Over.
Okay. Thank you very much, Abdurazak, and we look forward to having further discussion with you in the panel discussion in a moment. So now we're very pleased to be doing this session in partnership with the high-level panel of experts, and we're thrilled that Akiko Suwa-Eisenmann is joining us. She's a senior economist with Ingram in Paris, and has been very involved in the high-level panel work on data and food systems. So over to you to share a little bit about the high-level panel work and your understanding of the links to that to foresight thinking.
Thank you, Jim. I'm very happy and very honored to be part of this panel. Do you hear me clearly?
We hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Yes. So, as you know, the high-level panel experts on food security and nutrition is the science policy interface of the CFS. And at the request of the CFS, we provide independent and evidence-based analysis through a scientific peer review. We also open many e-consultations at different steps of the process where we seek comments from everyone interested. And the most recent HLPE report is on data collection and analysis tools for food security and nutrition towards enhancing effective, inclusive, evidence-informed decision-making. The report was presented to the CFS plenary this week. It was written by a team of 10 researchers of different fields led by Carlo Cafiero from the FAO. And I thank deeply Carlo and his colleague for this very important report. And I encourage everyone to read the report and to see the slides that Carlo has prepared for the CFS plenary. And this report on data comes in a rapidly changing environment. Digital data bring huge opportunities, while COVID and the current food crisis have stressed the need to get good data during emergencies. As a consequence, there are many initiatives currently underway on data collection and data governance. And today I will present the main message of the report on data and highlight how they can be relevant for foresight. First, the HLPE report starts with a key fact. Food security and nutrition outcomes are the result of decisions made at multiple levels in a complex system that involves many stakeholders. Food security results from interaction between the macro level, such as the climate, the meso level, such as the food system, from producers to consumers and everyone in between, the micro level, such as community in a village, and the individual level. Therefore, coordination between stakeholders that operate at this different level is important, and it's also what Foresight is doing. Decision-making on food security and nutrition needs to be data informed, and that means not only data collection and analyze, but also translating this data into insights, disseminating these insights before making decisions. And again, Foresight is key in this different process, so that data is part of the public debate. And a report also recognizes the limitation associated with an exclusive reliance on quantified variable in informing decision. Actually, in the report, data is not defined as just as numerical variable. They can also be qualitative and reflect a concept such as food security. The problem with concept, as you know, is that not everyone understands them in the same way. Hence, coordination starts with having a shared definition of concept. And so the two main messages of the report seems to me particularly relevant for today's talk on Foresight. First, the report says that we need to create demand for data. Often decision makers are not aware of the existence of data or do not use them appropriately. This is often due to a low level of data literacy and analysis skills for both quantitative but also qualitative data, especially in low-income countries, but not only in them. And second, there's a supply paradox. On the one hand, there are huge data gaps on FSN. Many countries still lack nationally representative agricultural census or household budget surveys that will be repeated over many years so as to get an idea of the evolution of the state of nutrition. And moreover, the recent crisis has shown us the need for timely data during emergencies. To be useful in such cases, data need to be sufficiently detailed, granular. For instance, we need to know people's ability to locally produce and access food, their precise diet and nutritional status at the household level, and sometimes even at the individual level within a household. But there is also a supply paradox. Alongside the huge data gaps, there is also plenty of data on aspects related to food security and nutrition, thanks in part to the digital revolution. The HLPE report shows how digital revolution, digital data can be a game changer, as they are easy to collect, to share, and to utilize. But however, they bring their own risk, such as privacy infringement or privatization. And the HLPE report suggests some recommendations. I will pick 3 of them, the last one being of particular interest for Foresight. The first one is that UN organizations and academics could lay out good practice for priority setting on data collection and their use. And second, the CFS could consider establishing a data trust for food security and nutrition data, where a subgroup of CFS members act as trustees and receive legal rights to make decisions on providing access to specific data on behalf of the data owners. And third, governments are encouraged to complete a data-informed decision-making matrix. I repeat again, data-informed decision-making matrix for food security and nutrition involving all stakeholders that would clarify available data source and analytical tools that are used for decision-making. Governments can also elaborate national plans to define priorities for food security and nutrition data collection and analysis, with actions to be financed by the international community. In short, FSN data must be considered as a public good, which is open by default and must circulate while preserving the rights of the people to whom the data belongs. Now, how does this main message of HLPE report apply to Foresight and scenario building? For me, the Foresight can be a powerful tool in solving both the issue of demand for data and of the supply gaps in data. First, Foresight embeds the key dimensions of a data-informed decision-making process, thinking about trends in the long run, be ready for possible risk, taking into account all the various levels, macro, micro, and the interaction, encouraging participants in a Foresight exercise to share their definition of concept and prioritize different factors. As such, Foresight can definitely raise the demand for data. On the other hand, I wish that Foresight also helps to raise awareness on data gaps. I don't know if it is always the case. I'm quite confident that the Foresight that we are discussing today will be answering this, but often the end product of a Foresight exercise is very macro with clear-cut scenarios summarized in a neat matrix based on two main factors. With this kind of neat result, we could wrongly infer that we know everything. It would be very helpful if the end product of a Foresight could also highlight where data is lacking, especially at the local and micro level, because we know that there is heterogeneity of impact. Just knowing the result on average is not sufficient. We need to have an idea of the whole range of results for a given group of people, whether this will increase inequality within the group or not. This would call for giving more detailed intermediary outcomes, and in doing so, Foresight initiative will help solve the data gap on food security and nutrition. Thank you, I'm done. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Akiko. That was extremely clear, and I think a very valuable linking between the work of the HLP and what we're talking about with Foresight. I think, again, you've really emphasized the importance when we're thinking about Foresight of sense making. And it's not just about data, it's about how we bring different stakeholders together to make sense of the data we need, the implications for the longer term future, and what data we actually need. So with those two contexts, what we'd like to do now is to share with you briefly the emerging work from the FAST program, and my colleague John Ingram, who's the lead of the Food Systems Group at the Environmental Change Institute in the University of Oxford, will just lead us through what that's about. And then our colleague Sara Savastano from IFAD will also share some thoughts about this, as this is being done in partnership with IFAD. So John, over to you.
Good, thank you very much, Jim, and good day, everybody. Let me just share a screen. There's the screen share. Good, I hope that's a screen visible to us all. So it's wonderful to be here today with you to give a little bit of a background and some detail on what we're looking at in this new exciting program on Foresight. Some excellent introductory comments already, so I won't dwell too much on the preamble, other than to say that Foresight and scenario analysis is now being used more widely to support processes of system change, taking the longer term perspective, and this is a really important point. So moving on, let me just start. Go ahead.
Sorry, John. Green doesn't seem to be showing.
Oh, bother. Let me try again. Sorry about this. There's a share screen. Let me just try that one.
Yep, that's working now.
Good.
If you just
Sorry
put it
for
on-
that,
if you
everybody.
just put it on.
Hope, is that good now, Jim?
That's perfect. Thanks. John.
Good. Okay. So excuse that hiccup. But anyway, moving on to some of the substance. The program Foresight for Food System Transformation, the FAST program. What is it? Well, as mentioned, it's a 3-year scenario and Foresight program to help transform the food systems in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. two major areas. It supports foresight and scenario analysis in what will be 5 focus countries, 3 in Africa, 1 in Asia, yet to be determined, but 1 in the Middle East is just starting, as I'll report in a few moments, in Jordan. But it also supports a global community of practice on food system foresight. So these 2 areas, the in-country work in 5 study countries, focus countries, and the more worldwide endeavour on enhancing foresight practice, very much interrelated with each other. So how does it work? Well, first of all, it's being implemented under the umbrella of the Foresight4Food programme that's sponsoring this seminar today, with funding from the Government of Netherlands through IFAD, as Patrick mentioned, and it's being delivered by members of the Foresight4Food network worldwide, together with national institutions, particularly in the focus countries. Briefly speaking, it's managed on behalf of Foresight by the Environmental Change Institute, where my lab operates, in close partnership with colleagues in Wageningen Research, the University and Research. So what's it going to do? Well, at the national level, the focus country FAST is going to respond to national needs and be co-designed in the way that Jim was describing to offer alternative and additional implementation of national pathways for the food system transformation. But furthermore, it's going to be collaborative, and it's got to coordinate with other related initiatives. And there's a lot of work going on, and Abdurazak was describing a lot going on in Africa, for instance. And it has to align with and support IFAD country programs within the focus countries and, of course, elsewhere. The support is taking forward this food system dialogue process. That's really what it's all about. But in addition, it's helping to bring together the quantitative analysis, the trend, the data we've just been hearing about, together with the modeling and the data visualization, into and incorporated with the stakeholder dialogue process, really to support foresight and scenario capacity development. So there is the capability at the national level to work with and benefit from foresight and scenario analysis to help set new pathways for national food security and food system transformation. That's the national level. A quick diagram here to highlight some of the main aspects. At the top, we see the policies and the pathways, the demand for information and advice on that, and then the support that the programme will be giving from the large green box in the middle, the scoping, the co-design, the sorts of things that Jim was referring to in one of his diagrams, supported by the network worldwide, delivered in partnership with national institutions. So that's really the way the whole programme will operate. Then at the global level, we'll be thinking about this community of practice and offering a brokering function for Foresight4Food, all the different approaches that communities around the world are using for foresight. And we'll be aiming to bring together the providers and users of food system analysis to share method, to share insight, to share understanding, which will then feed back into the national level process with latest internationally agreed approaches. It will also support methodological development that is bringing together the quantitative and qualitative approaches that we're seeing. This is where the data comes in, the modeling, together with the food system conceptual models that Jim used in one of his slides, and how we weave these quantitative and qualitative approaches together, very much in support of capacity development. Then we're also hoping to enable knowledge sharing across countries and initiatives through workshops, through the web, through online activities, webinars and the like. And this is to lead to enhanced capacity, motivation and joint learning for how we best use these new techniques to tackle the challenges of transforming our food systems to deliver more appropriate food system outcomes for health, for environment, for enterprise and livelihoods, etc. We're really interested in transforming the food system outcomes. So just to conclude, we had an inaugural set of discussions in the country of Jordan only last week. Very exciting to see the enthusiasm at the national level, opened by the Minister of Agriculture, and a lot of in-depth discussions around the table on food system transformation. So I'm really pleased to report that we're on the road. Jordan was an initial place to start these discussions on how it could be developed and implemented at a national level. Jim, let me close there and pass over, if I may, to Sara Savastano, Director of IFAD's Research and Impact Assessment Division. Sara, over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all the participants of this session. There are more than 120 people connected, and this shows the interest that this topic and this session is raising. Okay, so let me start acknowledging the Wageningen University and the University of Oxford for organizing this important event. What is clear now is that in the last 15 to 20 years, the agriculture sector has changed tremendously. And in some countries, there is still this division between subsistence farmers and off-farm activities, but the world, as the RDR Rural Development Report, as also of IFAD 2021 on food system transformation, has showed, together with the literature on food system, that the agriculture sector is changing from the hidden middle that was raised many times by Tom Reardon, Jo Sweenens and colleagues. We are now entering into an era of a food system approach to agriculture and rural transformation. And therefore, activities and initiatives as the Foresight initiatives are fundamental to try to ascertain and to understand how the linkages between the midstream, upstream, and downstream are organized, and to make sure that everybody is connected into the whole value chain. And therefore, we really hope that with this initiative, we will be able to draw some lessons that, for example, internally in IFAD, our country director, our expert can use to design new projects that can magnify the impact of the food system into our beneficiaries, which is the ultimate goal of IFAD, to increase the welfare and the income of small-scale producer, and ultimately by 2030 to double the impact, this so-called impact. So we need to support the small-scale producer that those who are located in the midstream segment of the food system. Who are those people? Those are the people who harvest, process, package, and transport our food, and grow approximately 1/3 of the food we eat. But what is another revolution that took place, and also more recently with the COVID, is the food delivery revolution. This is even more true in developed countries, but this is also starting in developing countries. The food delivery revolution, there is a paper that's been published recently on Science by Mark Bellamar, Tom Reardon and colleague, highlight this new challenge, the hidden middle, but now also the food delivery revolution, that will have strong consequences also on the environment, the way food is distributed, and may also increase inequalities between rural area and urban areas. And so we need to take into consideration all these factors in order to be able, at least in the case of IFAD, and the reason for partnering with the University of Oxford and also Wageningen, is to try to understand how those food system works in some selected countries, to be able to design investment projects that can be effective. But it's not only that. In IFAD, we conduct every 3 years an impact assessment. With this impact assessment, we collect data on 15% of the project that we finance, and we try to estimate attribution of IFAD projects on the productive capacities and the overall well-being of our beneficiaries. Evidence from the IFAD 11 impact assessment recently released in September at the executive board, and that covers the analysis conducted on projects that were completed between 2019 and 2021, consisted in 24 IFAD supported projects, data collected on more than 43,000 small-scale producers, we showed that IFAD supported projects were able to improve income of 77 million people, and also to improve their productive capacity for 62 million people, improve market access of 64 million people, and strengthening resilience of 38 million people. An important lessons that emerge from this effort is that it is essential to invest in value chain, and as I was mentioning before, in the middle segment of the agri-food system to maximize the benefit from increased production and productivity. Thus, IFAD is excited to collaborate with the FAST team in the Foresight4Food projects to identify future risks to food system and to have a clear understanding of opportunities. The data, the knowledge, the evidence that is produced from these projects will be critical to inform IFAD's future projects and strategies in the 5 countries of focus, as well as the overall investment portfolio in general. They will also complement very well other ongoing initiatives of the 50 by 2030 that we are conducting together with FAO and the World Bank, collect data in agriculture in 50 countries by 2030, but also develop capacity building and data literacy. Try to understand how data are presented, but how they can inform the policy debate. Thank you very much for inviting IFAD to participate in this event, and I look forward to the panel discussion. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. And again, we're very appreciative of the partnership with IFAD on this work. I think also what you're highlighting is it's really fundamental with this work. It's not about just abstract academic exercises. It's very much about getting the decisions that you and the information you need to make good investment decisions to help bring about change. So we're very pleased to have with us this afternoon, Ravi Khetarpal, who is the chair of GFAR, but also the executive director of APAARI. He's recently joined the Foresight4Food steering group. I know you have to go probably 5 minutes ago already, Ravi, but we thought it'd be really wonderful to have a perspective from you on this work, and then we'll move on with the discussion panel.
Thank you, Jim. And greetings to everyone from Bangkok. Well, you see a background of GFAR, which is there in FAO office, but I represent functionally Asia Pacific Association of Agriculture Research Institution. I have joined this group just a few weeks back, and I could assimilate what it's actually doing. And I was very happy to see that they have a program in our region in Dhaka. So what I'm going to say in the coming 4 minutes is mainly on how we look at this whole concept, the need, and what should be the way forward. So I'll be talking more in principle than with those big macroeconomics figures and millions and billions, and I'll just give you something very clear as a thought process. Number one, we have a large number of poor people living in the world. For them, present food is much important than what the food for the future or food in the future. But as a country, as a policymaker, as a manager, one has to really plan. Secondly, I would like to say, food system, agri-food system means that we have an agri-food ecosystem in the country. When we say agri-food ecosystem, which means we do have a multi-stakeholder platform existing, which is a big challenge. I can discuss more on that. That apart from not having a clear agri-food ecosystem, which needs to be a basic thing to be established to move ahead, I think we need, first of all, the agriculture innovation system. Because Foresight4Food for me is an excellent innovative approach. When people start looking at what will happen after 5 to 10 years, then they know what is happening today. So it made them realize in a way the continuity of the thought process of the importance of agri-food system under all conditions of natural calamities or economic crisis or war and conflict or natural disasters or whatever. Now, agri-food system eventually will be the key factor for contributing for food security. So what we say, a good platform with a good modeling, with good quantitative data and all, what we say will be crucial to have a evidence-based policy, which is correct. But the challenge is quite high for me. Maybe I don't know it quite well how it is happening. The challenge is if agri-food system is a key factor to look at food security, then we have to look at all the 4 pillars of the food security. We just can't look at production. We just can't look at accessibility of food. We just can't look at stability or resilience to biotic, abiotic stress, and other things. We just can't look at the utilization part. So the data collection, utilization, and extrapolation, I think, is a very, very important part in this Foresight for Food, because it is quite a complex scenario. Now, definitely, we need a clear way of moving forward. And as I heard from John and others, like in few countries it's going to be piloted, which is fine. But the point is we need to keep in mind in the long run, what kind of countries we are choosing. Because if I talk of my region, we have the least developed countries, we have the developing economies, we have the highly developed countries. So we are in a complex region, Asia Pacific. So how we do it, because at one stage we need to scale up, and there should be some kind of a modeling that can be scaled up in a bit. Once we have classified in a given class, we have a system of scaling up of the models which may come up from Foresight for Food. So I think these are very, very important parameters. And what is required right now is what is happening today with this panel discussion should be happening on and off with the region, a kind of awareness generation on what is it, what it means, what the global community means, what we think, and that will be very crucial to bring the awareness of stakeholders at all levels, and especially the policymakers here. So which I think we in our region are prepared to do it from our platform. We are prepared to do with more than 1,000 members of GFAR. That's fine. That is one thing I believe is very, very crucial. And to end my discussion, we really need to look at synergies among many things which Foresight for Food will be actually looking forward for moving forward. So to conclude, it is the integration of various phenomena, factors, organization and all, which will really make it go forward in a very positive way. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ravi. And that was really the beginning of our panel discussion, if you like. But unfortunately, Ravi has to leave us due to a clash that we hadn't quite realized earlier on. But I think that's a very good starting point. And what I'd like to now is give the microphone first to Sara and then to Winnie to sort of perhaps bring us back to some more grounded realities of what this actually means. So Sara Mbago-Bhunu is the Regional Director for Eastern Southern Africa for IFAD. So over to you for some of your reflections on all of this and what you think the practical implications are of applying Foresight in your region.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting my participation and reflections on this platform. Greetings from Nairobi in Kenya. So basically, the realities are stark. In South Africa, Zambia, Tanzania, and Malawi are the 4 key suppliers of maize in Eastern Southern Africa region, and they're highly dependent on the importation of fertilizer. The increasing rise in fertilizer prices will translate into lower accessibility with implications on planting and yield prospects for the next agricultural season for this region. So now we're talking about food, fuel, fertilizers, and freight price shocks, which are basically driving the food and nutrition crisis in the East and Southern Africa region. So definitely what we've been talking about today, an integrated response to transforming food systems for resilience, is absolutely vital. So while we see in the Horn of Africa a horrendous hunger and famine in Somalia, Djibouti, northern Kenya, and Ethiopia, we of course cannot overrule the immediate need for humanitarian assistance. But in the medium term, we need strategies that will maintain food production and availability in these coming years, in the next 3 years. And again, we also need to basically have trade-offs and invest for the longer term to transform food systems to become more resilient, healthy, and inclusive and sustainable in order to avoid an escalating food systems crisis. So the needs in this region are actually very immediate. And for me, I think this conversation forms a very good bedrock on how we're going to be able to, in a balanced and a very integrated way, look at those 3 planning frameworks, which is what the governments are facing right now. The very short-term humanitarian need and the needs to invest there, the medium term to actually keep up with population growth and make sure food is available, and the long-term systemic transformations that we've been talking about, and for which Food for Foresight is really going to help us to address. And I think this is what we see. The link between high food prices, social and political instability is well known now and recognized. The fact that there is ongoing crisis at local levels fueled by conflict over natural resources is also what is rolling out in this region. And then given the fact that, there's limited fiscal space as a cause of weakening domestic currencies, debt overhangs across the 22 countries in this region, and the impacts of COVID, and obviously the Ukraine impact on prices, there's really very few resources left to strengthen social safety net systems, to protect the most vulnerable in this context, and also invest in the long term. So since there is a significant shortfall in financing, we do need to see how we can start developing clear pathways for the future. And also this really means on how can we actually improve the productive capacities in landscapes which are depleted and degraded, how we can actually look at how we promote biodiversity with the natural capital we actually have, and how we can also promote processing locally, shorten supply chains, improve on logistics, and actually meet the needs of a growing population that's actually changing the way that they eat. And diets are changing right across the region as we urbanize. So all of these, existential drivers of what we need to plan for and what we need to actually support governments to do. So what I want to just emphasize on is the innovation ecosystems that exist. We know very well that in the global south, particularly in East and Southern Africa, innovation in investment in agriculture research in environmental systems is sorely lacking. And it's estimated that we need about 4 billion a year to invest in R&D that is actually going to be able to do what we want to do in terms of food system transformation. So that's where it starts. And so we need to attract and deploy at least about 6.5 billion until 2030 for climate smart technical mitigation and adaptation capacities. And we also need to innovate in how we finance, how we provide agriculture extension and strengthen infrastructure. So this is it. We also need to be able to have solutions for water resource management, which is a key factor for drought. So now we know that most of the research is not going into areas of social inclusion, nutrition, and health in food systems transformation. So we do hope that the FAST program, as you have described here in the ways in which you can do modeling and forecasting, are going to look at that and build up capabilities in this space to actually be able to plan for and inform policymakers to, first of all, invest in sustainable and circular management and utilization of natural resources. Consider also investing in the competitiveness of value chains in the region, because this commercial need, the need for expanding fiscal space, is a very real need for government. So you have to combine that as well. And finally, I also think that there is space that as we plan, we need to look at aspects of equity, aspects of ethical, sustainable food systems, not only for this current generation, but for future generations as well. And that transition, it will definitely not be an easy one. It is a very expensive one because of years of underdevelopment in East and Southern Africa for those capabilities. And that's the biggest challenge. And so we, and particularly myself, are really looking forward in the countries selected in this region. I think it's Uganda and Kenya at the moment, to see how this planning tool is going to help collective efforts, even from the RBAs, FAO, WFP, looking at how we can invest less in the short term, immediate term for humanitarian efforts, and really start, looking forward in investing in more in the medium and longer term, so we can see that transition at farm level, but also along the value chain. So thank you very much, and I pass the floor back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was great. And I think you just so well articulated the need to look about the short, medium and long term, but doing that in an integrated way, and the potential role that Foresight processes can play in that. I'm now coming to Winnie Yegon, who is a fellow of the African Food Systems Fellowship Program. We've been working together on using some Foresight processes, but she's also a food systems advisor with FAO, and so has got her hands very deeply involved in this work. So we'd really appreciate some reflections on you around the Foresight process, how that's been helping in your work, and some of your insights about how you think this could be used into the future. So Winnie, over to you. I am sort of conscious that we're starting to run out of time. I'll come back to the other panelists for some brief sort of final comments, but let me give you a good chance to have some reflections.
Thank you, Jill, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Winnie. Greetings from Nairobi. So this conversation is very interesting, and it's very timely, following from the dialogues that have just been happening from the Food System Summit and the upcoming climate change conference. So looking at all the discussions that my fellow speakers have shared their insights on foresights and food systems, what we now need to start thinking about using the foresight and scenario setting methodology is which path do we follow? Because I realize we have so many options in how we want to transform our food systems. And looking at the food system approach, it is indeed very complex, and the interactions among the different drivers, the different stakeholders it's a very complex kind of system. So which path to follow is really the big question we have in the room, because there are so many scenarios, there are so many uncertainties, and there are so many trends. So bringing that down to the work that we do, we have really tried to bring in both the data aspects, because we do lots of studies, lots of research to give us insights into where our current food system is, and now trying to map out where to go next. Now bringing that in together with the stakeholders, and we use the approach of multi-stakeholders, because we realize that the decision making cannot be done by one particular entity. Looking at the food system, there are so many decisions that need to be made. So how do we bring them together? For decision making. So that is where the foresight now comes in, because we are able to now map the different options that we have, and zooming in and zooming out, and now moving forward. So particularly in the case of looking at trends such as urbanization and the impact it will have on the decisions that we are making. And I know that some of the decisions we have, we may not be able to really look at the entire scope in terms of the degree. So what we do using the foresight methodology is to try and look at which options should we now particularly focus on? So that is what we have been doing. And as Jill mentioned, this is what we learned particularly through the African Food Fellowship, which has really enhanced our capacities in terms of decision making, because that is what we need to start thinking about. So which path do we now need to follow using the Foresight methodology? Because the food system transformation is a very complex problem. And if we do not get it right in terms of which path to follow, we might make a decision today and in a few years we face a bottleneck. So that is what I can contribute at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Winnie. And I knew I was going to be struggling to sort of get an ongoing panel discussion, given the time we've got. An hour and a quarter is very short to cover something like this, but I think it's been fabulous contributions from everybody. And I just wanted to let people sort of talk through their story a little bit. We have a few minutes left, I think, just to go around some of the panel members to get some final reflections. And then I'll ask Herman Brauer from Wageningen to just give a couple of final wrap up points. Let me first come with a slightly provocative question to you, Patrick. I mean, are we dealing in such a complex, uncertain world where any talk about foresight is a bit of nonsense?
Nonsense. We talked a lot about uncertainty and what we don't know. But there are at least two issues we know about. Number one, there are and there will be many disruptions. Number two, we know that we don't know everything and that we have to get prepared. And what Foresight is about is three pillars. Number one, the need to strengthen intelligence of what occurs. Number two, the needs to strengthen the capacity to adapt, what we call resilience sometimes. And number three, the need to act collectively. And this is what Foresight is about. And this is, to finish with a note, a positive note, we have to engage in this certainty and not just uncertainty of strengthening these three pillars if we want to do that. And the beauty of Foresight4Food is maybe to do it both at the local and national level and to try to build a global capacity, because we will have to share that at across scales if we want to change the food systems.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Akiko, can I come back to you for a final sort of insightful point on all of this?
Yes, so I think it's an exciting panel, and I want to stress one thing which seems to me very important for HLPE, jumping back on what Ravi said earlier. There is not 4 pillars of food security, but 6. Sustainability and agency. Agency refers to the capacity for individuals to make their choice on what they eat and how to procure it. And I think that for Foresight is really about agency. Engage society, as you said, Jim, to the future we want. But this entails a risk, and the challenge, risk or challenge, which will fully be represented in a Foresight exercise. How can we make sure that marginalized group, informal sectors, such as those that Sara mentioned, on those that are doing delivery, transport, packaging, will they be represented in, and will they have their voice? Either we need to have everyone on the table, or make sure that we know how to estimate inequality within group. And we know that social optimum is not the sum of all interest. I want to know your opinion about this. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Akiko. Sara, could I, oh, sorry, are you still with us? Oh yeah, you are. Sara Mbago-Bhunu. Sorry, yeah, you dropped off my screen for a moment. We've talked a little bit about the importance of this not being just an academic or a data exercise, about engaging with debates in society, about engaging with policy. Do you have any final reflections with us about how we really make this connection between Foresight providers, if you like, and Foresight users from your experience in the East Africa context?
No, thank you. No, I think the Foresight platform is the way it has been designed. is meant to engage with the ecosystem of stakeholders in the way that you approach it. And I think that will be the key will be in that sort of puzzle of how you keep those different stakeholders engaged. It's always often difficult to have discussions with a different level of stakeholders, producer organizations, government, research institutes, private sector, in a structured way. And I think that will be the challenge that you have going forward. But I think there's already quite a lot to build upon. The original investment that was made in the food systems, the dialogues, the action plans that are already in place, the One Africa position and so on. So I think the challenge is then to say, as Winnie has said, what are the concrete pathways, and can we, it's not a one-fit-sum game. Are there ones that we can deploy in the very short term in scenario A? Are there other ones that we should consider for medium-term investment? And what can you then consider for the long term? And I think if we put that lens in, it won't be a trade-off scenario situation, but it actually be very, very practical in the sense of this is what you need to do to build resilience and now, and even build capabilities for forecasting, which would inform also where you need to invest in government systems, and then where you can bring in other partners to invest later on. But I hope that sheds a little bit light of what I'm anticipating from this end. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Sara. Abdurazak or Winnie, just very quick last comment from you if you've got something you'd like to add very briefly.
Thank you, Jim. Just to say that it's very clear that Africa's food system comprises of multiple interacting factors, and that although there's some level of progress in addressing the challenges within the system, we need to really continue to do more in terms of advocating for this departure from the reductionist approach to adopting the agricultural innovation system to the Foresight and food systems approach. And so within the Africa Foresight Academy, we will continue to advance that and expand the partnership and really support all of the various initiatives at country and sub-regional levels. And we hope to really continue to count on the various supports of our different partners here and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah. Indeed, recognizing the complexities that are in the food system, I believe this is an important tool that we need to really build capacity on both at global, regional, and national levels, so that as decisions are being made, because a lot is happening within the food system towards transformation of the same. And this is the critical time, because this is now when we are making the decisions. So being able to really look at the different scenarios, look at the different interactions of the different factors and actors and drivers and trends, just generally the complex system. This is a very important tool that we really need to utilize, so that as we move forward, we will look backward and really see that we have made positive and important strides for our food systems. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Winnie. Look, I think that's been an extremely rich hour and a quarter. I think, as I said at the beginning, I think I offered you the menu cart, not the meal. And we hope you'll come back to join us for the meal of Foresight for Food Systems Transformation. But thanks very much for all of those who've been in the room and those that have been online. And we look forward to engaging you further. Let me now hand over to Herman Brown from Wageningen University and Research to give some closing comments.
Thank you very much, Jim. And thank you, everybody, for this wonderful exchange. And also so good to see how many people have put in so much thought and effort to further and advance this field. So without trying to summarize everything, what has been said here, I recall that Patrick started by mentioning this paradox, right? There's lots of data. We have much data, but we can't imagine the future. So how do we somehow work with this paradox? Now, over this hour, I've heard several really promising initiatives that actually try to advance that field, and that really, even though the challenges are fierce and are growing, still make me slightly positive about the potential for us to really address some of these challenges using foresight and scenarios. And if I think what could be ahead for Foresight4Food and also for the FAST program, which we are involved in the 5 countries, and that was presented by John. I think there's 2 possible kind of implications from it, and that's where I'll leave the discussion for now. One is that I've heard many comments by Akiko and also others, Akiko, about data literacy and about data gaps and about the role of academics and researchers to really try to package some of the available data in a much better way that's becoming more useful for decision makers. At the same time, we know that just making that information available is not enough, and that you don't win hearts and minds by presenting data necessarily. And that's where I pick up on some of the other speakers that have mentioned collective sense making as also an essential element of a foresight process, where it is much more about establishing dialogue with others about some of the evidence, rather than competing about which evidence is really helpful. Because just to remind ourselves that in many parts of the world we see an increase in post-truth or fake news, so the reliability of the data that we're using and presenting is often being questioned, and it requires also different ways of us to present information and communicate about it. And perhaps we even need not just more science and scientific rigor to go into it, but maybe we also need art and culture to help us communicate some of the important issues we're talking about. So the other part is about leadership. When I listen to Vinny and also to Ravi and Sara, I hear strongly that there's many potential users of foresight methodologies and so on that really could make the difference. And I wonder whether as a community we should do more to really get clear what are some of the capacities that need to be in place, and that Foresight4Food might be able to support them with, so that they can take actions on the many different skills at which they're active. So I really look forward to working with all of you in the future in the Foresight4Food community to make that happen in the future. But let me stop there, Jim. And thank you very much for the opportunity and this wonderful webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Herman. I think we're really out of time now, more than out of time. So again, thank you to the panelists for joining us. Thanks for all the participants for joining us. You can sign up to the Foresight4Food website to get more information. We will be launching a series of more in-depth online seminars over the coming months. And otherwise, just get in contact with us by email if you'd like to connect in other ways. So again, thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon or good morning, depending which part of the world you're in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.